Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that your day is going very well. And I do have a lot to talk to you about as I begin this new experimental phase of live streaming my public comment video blog. And the first thing I want to talk to you about today is balance. And I know that's a little bit seemingly unpolitical on the surface, but it actually does have political implications. You see, the truth is, I am a perfectionist, and I don't mean that in any kind of egotistical way. In fact, the irony in life, well, I don't know how ironic or not ironic it is. I don't know if that was the right choice of word. You see right away the traps I fall into here. The thing is, I have been accused on occasion here and there of being pretentious or coming across pretentious or condescending. And the truth of the matter is, I really don't ever mean to be. So if I ever come across to you as elitist or pretentious, please do know, not my intention whatsoever. In fact, I think one of the motivations behind doing these live streams is the ability to actually talk to you in practice, talking to people and not coming across as preaching or lecturing or being so uptight that I can't relate or some such thing. You know, that's one of my insecurities, is that I'm too dry or some such thing, that I keep you at arm's length, that I'm uninviting, that I'm distant. I don't know, these kinds of things, you know. I don't want any of that. The whole point of this public comment concept for me is the importance of our ability to talk to each other and have meaningful conversations about living well, about what it means to thrive and how we work together to bring about a more thriving community. That's really what I'm all about. That's what my education, my college education, really taught me more than anything, was the value of community. And you know, one of the things I love doing to build community is really facilitating conversation. So that's one of my objectives here. But I told you I wanted to talk a little bit about balance. So I'm going to try to do a sort of really honest, full disclosure here. To a degree, honesty scares me. I'll be honest with you about that from the very beginning. What scares me about honesty? I think it's what scares probably a lot of people. You know, this fear that you would be dismissed for saying what it is you really think. Because you see how somebody can just sort of jump on what you say, not know the fuller context of it, run away with it and close you down and hate you or talk bad against you or dismiss you, etc. That's something that, that's one of my fears. I'll give you a perfect example, okay? Let's talk about immigration. Now, I want to say this to begin with. I am for immigration, and I think that the treatment of immigrants, whether they come here legally or illegally, I think they need to be treated right. I think all people need to be treated like people, with dignity and love and compassion and a desire for each of us to see one another thrive the best we can. I mean, this to me is just common sense. I don't know how you have a well-to-do society if you don't wish the people in your society to do well. How the Republican Party doesn't get that is just beyond my capacity to understand, but we'll get there. I don't want to digress too much. Okay, so here's the thing. If we're talking about, say, the incidence of illegal immigration. Now, I had this class when I was in college where I used the term illegal immigrants. And I was very much criticized by my professor and said, oh, no, the term illegal immigrant is humiliating and denigrating to people in that situation. And I thought, and she said, they have to be called, or, I would hope that you would call them instead, undocumented workers. And the thought that came to my mind was, look, I'm not out there to champion this belief that for whatever reason, if you cross the border illegally, that the answer is deportation, nor is the answer to be scapegoated for this country's problems, or to be harassed, or to be mistreated, right? But that doesn't change the fact that if you do cross the border illegally, it's illegal. And I think that as we have this conversation on immigration, it's like nobody could be honest about it on either side of the aisle. Am I saying that we shouldn't open up our borders, especially to people in Central America, where choosing to stay in your town is essentially asking a gang to extort you? I understand the need to let in refugees. This is something I'm totally for. Which, by the way, not to digress again too much, but there's the conversation about people seeking political asylum, and there are other scenarios in which people enter our borders through different ways. Anyway, bottom line is this. I believe in, very compassionate immigration policy, pathway to citizenship for people who come here. But that doesn't change the fact, and I think that we do need to find a way to have an honest conversation about this, that if you cross the border illegally, you do, in fact, cross the border illegally. Liberals are probably hurting themselves by not being straightforward about that. Anyway, my point is this, in the fear of being, honest and saying what it is you really think. I have this fear that if I'm upfront about my view on immigration so explicitly that everyone's going to say, oh, he's anti-immigrant and, cut me off or what have you. And the fact is I'm not anti-immigrant, but I'm a technical and logical and objective person. And if you cross the border illegally, you did cross the border illegally, which would technically, you would be an illegal immigrant in that sense, right? So I don't like this, I think that one reason why I get anxious about being so honest is that we do tend to be so euphemistic in our language that daring to be a little bit more direct and explicit, one may feel the risk of being dismissed. I don't know. It's just a thought. I haven't actually tested it out. But it's an insecurity of mine. I suppose we'd find out by however this may or may not be received. What else? Talking about honesty here. I think often when I talk about situations, I have a fear. I've probably brought this up to you in the past before, but I really have a fear of incompetence. I have a fear of both appearing incompetent, and I have a fear of both a fear of appearing incompetent and a fear of actually being incompetent, doing unwell, messing up, mistakes. I'm a perfectionist, essentially. And the thing about being a perfectionist is you get so self-conscious about what mistake you may or may not make. And so that's a thing that can mess me up. Part of it may have to do with so many years of writing and revising what I write that it's become a habit to think, well, the first thing that I write is not going to be what ends up on the page. Therefore, I don't really think so much about it. Whereas knowing when I talk extemporaneously, there's no revision allowed. There's no revision that can happen. So whatever I say stands. And if I said something stupid, which I would, had this been written, subsequently crossed out, I can't. So that's something that makes me very insecure. Of course, it motivates me to try and master the art of extemporaneous speaking anyway. Because I also can't stand the thought of not being good at something or not being able to at least do something or try to do something. I don't like being intimidated by things. Right, it'd be another example. What else? So, let's see. I'm in a weird state in my life that is having a sort of interesting psychological impact. And not just psychological, but philosophical and intellectual. And is changing the way I think about life in general and how I conduct my life, what I do day to day, how I present myself, what my long-term goals are, etc. And it's a really unique situation that I've never been in before. So, as you may know, I recently graduated college, would have been last December. And I had thought I was going to get a graduate assistantship at the creative writing MFA program at William Patterson University. And the fact is I didn't. I thought that a 3.98 GPA and really thoroughly revised and thought out writing portfolio and experience working for William Patterson University, working at a tutoring center, etc. I thought all of this sort of made me qualified. For whatever reason, it wasn't meant to be. It's not something that makes me, it is what it is in life. You just don't always land the opportunities that you thought. But I really wanted that. I thought I really wanted that graduate assistantship. And when it didn't, when I didn't get it, when I found out that I didn't get it, that was it changed the way I thought about what my future was going to hold, because I had sort of this vision of myself as an academic, and I had this vision of the doors in academia just kind of opening for me. Not because I'm an egotist or a narcissist or anything like that, just because, I thought it was as simple as my GPA was good and I got along really well with my professors. And I just kind of thought it seemed like a straightforward thing that I fit well in academia. I get along with everybody I work with, I think, at the tutoring center, at the Mercer County Community College Tutoring Center. I love everybody I work with there. I get on really well in my conversations with professors. I've had exceptional relationships, I believe, with every professor I've pretty much had. There were two professors whose pedagogies I rather deeply disagreed with, to be frank. But otherwise, college has been good to me. Ironically, if you contrast it to how I started out in life, it turns out college was very good to me. And I thought that college was this panacea for me. I thought that academia was this open door for me. And, excuse me, when it turns out it's not as simple as just having great relationships with professors and having a great GPA and doing everything that you thought you were supposed to do, and that appears not to be enough, that really changes the way one looks at life. And it also raises a question of what do you want to do with yourself? You see, you could say, in a way, I experienced a kind of trauma pre-college because I spent the majority of my 20s working in retail and despising it. I hated retail. I despised it. I worked at the grocery store. I was a cashier, And it was the most mind-numbing work to me. And I don't mean that with any disrespect to cashiers. What's mind-numbing for me is not going to be what's mind-numbing for you. I just found it boring, and while the life of transaction after transaction is something for some people where it's a good way to talk to your customers and be acquainted with what's up for sale and the deals on all of these things, and building rapport in the workplace and having all these kinds of experiences. But the thing for me was, frankly, I was pretty much always thinking about writing, philosophy, politics, just other things. My mind was so much more like not interested in that work. And so there's this thing, especially one of the privileges of being an American, one of the privileges probably even being in the West, or many Western influenced, individualism influenced cultures, is this notion of there's what you want to be or do in life and what you must do to get by. So, especially in my early 20s, because I decided I was better than college and blew it off, I had to experience that part of life, which is doing what you can just to make money, doing what you must, so to speak. So I did what I had to do. I worked a job as a cashier and did side projects, creative, political, media oriented on the side that never really went anywhere. Separate conversation, but you see right there are these two impulses. And one is the impulse towards self-actualization and wanting to fit into economic life in a way that really speaks to your heart and soul and your sense of truly being, again, self-actualized into your potential and really offering the best thing you can offer to society. Serving society in your best capacity and what it might mean to do that. And then there's, again, what are you going to do to make sure there's food on your table and that you're sleeping under a roof? Now, post-college, I'm in a place where, I've got the food on the table thing down. Not that it's the most lucrative position at this point. It's at the tutoring center as a writing tutor. But, at the very least, I feel excellent about the kind of work that I do there. And I don't make minimum wage. So that's good. That being said, it's not where I see myself moving forward in life. And that's the big question, is as I think about the future, right? The question is, what can I do to feel that I am sort of the best I can be at how can I best serve society? Not in some kind of, altruistic way, but in a sense that, can make me happy. I think it is important for people to follow their bliss. And I want to do this. And again, so what it means in terms of searching for a job, money, means of employment, versus doing exactly what it is I want to do, that's a beginning question on what is balance as a responsible adult. How do you balance these things? And that's what I'm talking about right now. Certainly, if you have comments, if you have thoughts on this subject, I want to hear them. I even want to start, I want to integrate your comments more into these things. I know that there's a way to integrate Skype comments and video integration into these live streams. So that's something I think I'm interested in doing in the future. What I am going to do is take a second here and play with my, it's called ManyCam. It's a software in which I can write stuff, which is really cool. And I'm going to say, be right back. BRB. Because I have to use the bathroom. Nature calls. I'll be right back. You know what I need is some sort of like commercial break concept, something I can sort of put in that creates a more entertaining background than BRB. But though it actually amuses me. You know, there's a joke at the tutoring center where I work, where one of my coworkers, Mark, he will often say something that amuses himself, and he'll see me and I have this very serious face, and he'll marvel at how it seems like very little makes me laugh. This may be true. One of my flaws, and right, because we're having this conversation about the struggle for balance. One of my flaws is that I'm too serious. A lot of the time, people might say, I don't know. It's I believe it's very possibly a genetic thing. For whatever reason, I just am very serious. I cannot help it. And as a fact, very little actually makes me laugh. It's not because I'm pretentious and I think I'm better than everybody that I don't laugh at a lot of things. I just, very little tends to make me laugh. There are things here and there, but yeah, that's I noticed that that's an aspect of myself. So, you know, this whole conversation about balance, especially in the realm of, like, the way it's relevant for me now is this conversation about how to balance, like, being a productive individual in society, but also doing the thing, I don't know, you were meant to do, or the thing you want to do, the thing that makes you feel self-actualized. And so people might be asking, how, in what way, shape, or form is video blogging through this live stream venue on Facebook and putting it over the internet, how in the world does that offer anything productive in the world? And the answer is, you know, again, there's an interesting thing to me in psychology about those parts of us within the depths of our souls that can't be shaken, that seem literally to be foundational to who we are. And one of the things that I realized is foundational to who I am is this desire to communicate, and to communicate what's on my mind, and put it out there for public discussion. I mean, I have a rational basis for why I think it makes sense. I think that effective communication builds deeper understanding and empathy, and therefore greater community. So that's just how I'm driven. Part of it, I think, is just a deeply embedded core aspect of my soul. I think another part of it is deeply intellectual. So that's where I am. This is my goal. I have no idea whatsoever how this translates into economic productivity or social use beyond my more, esoteric view of it. I don't know. I know that there's a deep political element to this. Those of you who know me best know I'm an extremely political person, and I want, therefore, to make politics a major factor of this. I was taking notes on exactly how I wanted this to go, and where I'm going with this public comment concept is essentially two things. That I'm in this realm of what it is I want to communicate to the world. What are my themes or my motifs? My motifs overall are just politics and, frankly, self-improvement. What it means to live a better life and to think about how we live our lives. Yeah, that's a fact. Self-improvement is a very deeply personal issue to me. It's something deep within my soul. In fact, I'm going to go to my lower thirds section here and even change the caption to self-improvement. My desire for self-improvement, and watch how we can switch that. Isn't that cool? I know you don't love my broom in the background. I'm going to get that out of the way. I want to make this look at least sort of professional. Self-improvement. So, right context. The context really goes back to my younger days. I guess it's a fact that as a kid, I was deeply depressed, deeply anxious, struggling with self-confidence, and therefore not really engaged in any of my academics very deeply, not very practiced in any kind of sort of confident, logical, critical thinking. And just I was very deeply emotional as a kid. And so I didn't really take on life with any sense of feeling. I didn't believe I could understand things. I truly believed myself to be some incompetent freak of nature or something, to tell you the truth. That's the way it was in those days. And though the sort of silver lining was I had a capacity to be very self-expressive and creative. So I did a lot of writing. I did some acting things, and that meant that at least I had this drive to be productive in life, though I never really felt good about my productivity, because I never was able to evaluate what I was doing or think about what I was doing rationally, and I couldn't do that. I didn't really know what rationality was in those days, to be frank with you. And I had this thing in my head that I was going to be a writer that didn't need college, because I had this really poor attitude that I didn't need it. But the fact is, I was also intimidated by it. I was deeply intimidated by college by the time I was 19. I didn't believe I had the capacity to grasp concepts, academic concepts. And anyway, I thought it was all big, I thought the professors were out there to brainwash me, that they were brainwashing all of us. This would have been back in 2005, 2006. That's where I was thinking. And I just needed to run away from all that and get away from all that. And I developed a really negative outlook. And at the same time, one that was not constructive or rational. So there was just this not good results out of it, right? By the end of it all, I'm cashiering at a grocery store, making minimum wage, making just enough to live in a room in someone else's house, which isn't a stable thing, where you find yourself every 6 months or so having to leave and find somewhere else to live, and depressed all the time and very defensive all the time, and not really interacting with the world, like very oblivious to things, and not even aware of what's going on. I knew the president and vice president were, and that we were in war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and didn't really get much deeper than that. I didn't even know that the United States was in debt until 2011, 2010, when I started reading about politics for the first time, to tell you the truth. So where am I going with this? The fact was, I had this very poor lifestyle. I drank a lot of alcohol at night to sort of alleviate the negative feelings, I guess, the anxiety and all that came along with it. And also it meant I had a lot of bad or not ideal relationships with people, where, if you're not approaching your life fundamentally from a sort of at least somewhat rational perspective, I mean, you're not going to have relationships that go in that direction either. So, I'm not sure that I was, I wasn't, say, a good son or a good friend or a good sibling or a good cousin or a good nephew or a good grandkid or, really any of these things, or a good boyfriend. And that was all quite unfortunate. Not so much that I was this belligerent person, so much as, I think that I was so depressed and anxious all the time and so negative that all I could do was sort of detach and or be defensive. And I mean, that's the fact of the matter. That's the way I thought. Anyway, the whole reason I'm putting this out there is the fact that I got myself out of that way of being. And a huge part of that was my academic experience, which, fundamentally transformed me. It really did. And now it always has me thinking about, questioning if I'm approaching things objectively, if I'm treating people well, if I'm doing the right things. I'm really motivated by this question. Am I doing the right thing? That's the question that lingers throughout the day, right? Minute after minute. Am I doing the right thing? Did I do this correctly? Give you here's just one example. Perhaps you relate to this, but I had a cell phone drop and break the other day, and so I had to get a new one. And so the daunting thing in my mind is, oh my God, if I get a new cell phone, what the hell kind of cell phone am I supposed to get? I don't want to get the wrong one. I don't get the one that's going to break quick. I don't want to get the one that's going to cause some kind of problem in life. So there's that. Even this whole like live stream concept, I ask myself, should I be doing this? Is it right for me to do it? But I mean, I've come to the logical conclusion that yes, I have a desire to talk to you, so I'm going to do it. I always, desire, the experience of desire is something psychologically that really interests me. If you have a desire, I think you can ask, is it a destructive desire? Does it appear to be a reasonable thing that you desire? And if it does, you should probably go with it. That's been my philosophy since probably 2012, I think, is when I really got interested in this question of rational desire. Of course, whether or not the desires I've had in the last 7 years have been or haven't been rational, that's a loaded conversation. Maybe I will find out that I wasn't supposed to be doing this with my time. I have another 40 minutes before I have to get ready to go to the tutoring center, and this is how I'm choosing to spend it. The other thing that I have this sort of deep desire for is to know the news. That's very important to me, and we'll get to the news. But the news is very important to me, and is part of my sense of self-improvement, or self-improvement. Because I believe no matter where you are in life, you can always improve. So, knowing the news for me is essential to day-to-day self-improvement for me. It gives me one of the most curious comforts just to have an understanding to the best of my ability of what's going on in the world around us. And that's just the way I am. I do enjoy creative writing. I don't know, it's strange though. I had this weird experience. I guess it happened within about the last 2 weeks, because I was doing a lot of creative writing. Every morning I'd get up for about 2 hours and I would just write. And I don't know, something happened where I felt that in all the creative writing I was doing, I was very detached from the amount of news I wanted to get. And also that, I don't know, there was something I felt it just made me feel a sense of detachment. That it wasn't the correct path at the time any longer. It's very difficult for me to explain what happened. I was at work, and it just sort of hits me. I'm in the middle of reading War and Peace by Tolstoy and writing this flash fiction creative piece, and all of a sudden I just had to stop, and I just thought, I just feel all of a sudden a lack of pleasure from this. No longer enjoying this. I don't know why entirely. And I just stopped, and I said, I thought, what I really want to do is just to be more acquainted with my thoughts and to express them. I think that's one of my greatest values in life, is being able to talk. about stuff, being able to think clearly about stuff and talk about stuff. I've always been insecure about being able to talk, to be valid or legitimate in what I talk about. Pretty much unless it's politics. That's one realm in the world in which I put a exceptional degree of study. My politics, my history, and my philosophy, and my literature, the humanities. I know my humanities pretty well. Of course, I don't find that it really serves me in any practical way, though I do feel it equips me, at least perhaps, to be a meaningful, at this point, talker. I do feel that. I do. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say on this topic. Well, this whole setup is really amazing. Here I am, 33 years old, and I have the ability to look straight at every one of you through this camera and just say what I think. And I find that to be, I think, like the most empowering experience I've ever had. I really do. It just strikes me now as amazing. I enjoy the autonomy. I don't know. And it's not that I like writing less. In fact, I have a desire, I think to write a memoir at some point. Beyond that, there are two things. In fact, perhaps I'll write this as my next Chiron here. Politics and self-improvement. I would say, aside from figuring out the ideal video blogging, live streaming, media interface question of how to best communicate, that the themes that definitely interest me the most in life are politics and self-improvement. And in fact, I find them to a degree considerably to go hand in hand. Because I find that, first of all, the politics are the rules that we go by. And the rules that we go by are going to be a significant aspect of how well off or not well off we are, or especially if the rules that we go by, the policies, are unfair, or they are they're rules that discriminate against people, which has been the case for most of human history, quite unfortunately. But there are other aspects that have to do with education and understanding and utilizing your autonomy, and that interests me too, and just certain practical aspects of life that I haven't appreciated until it occurred to me that I need to figure out how to make money in a more prompt manner. I think I said this in an earlier video, but one of the things about being a student in academia is that everything is so academic and theoretical that you can sort of take a step back and not necessarily think as much about the question of how your skills can best be put to use economically. Maybe the urgency, that sense of urgency, can't quite be as much there because your mind is going to be a little bit more focused on passing the test. Don't get me started on my thoughts on testing and all of these things. Well, okay, you could get me started because I have a lot of opinions on testing and pedagogy and all this stuff. Very much so. Very, very much so. I mean, I frankly think the amount of pressure that professors put on their students often is unreasonable and anxiety-inducing and besides the point. Now, look, am I saying that professors should be unreasonably easy? Of course not. I do think, however, that your GPA is not going to say or mean as much about your life. It's not going to have as much significance as ultimately what you do day to day and how you do it. So, I mean, if you care to appreciate biology, look, I think it's a good thing. I loved my biology class, but what difference does it make at the end of the day what grade I got on it? I mean, I do feel like a tinge of mild cynicism about it because, I mean, I'm not making more or less money because I got an A in biology, right? So, the value of the grade in schoolwork is something that I feel like, on the one hand, personally, I get a thrill out of being able to do the work competently. And I like to see the evidence of my ability to do it competently. And in that sense, an A feels good. But it just doesn't result in certain other things. So I just wonder, as we look at the way academia works, the way professors approach what they teach, the way students approach what they learn, in what ways is it being put to practical use? I think that's the bottom line. In what ways is it being put to practical use? And I don't mean that, again, in any kind of anti-intellectual way. I think if you listen to me talk, I'm like to think that I'm considerably intellectual in my approach to things. But I did digress. Wanting to get back, self-improvement, right? Practicality, getting a job, all these things. But, there are other things I want to get really good at. For example, my wife and I, we're in the process of getting a condo, purchasing a condo. And there are so many elements to this process, from qualifying for a loan to having all of the correct documents for the people who are going to offer you said loan, to the appropriate inspections on the property, to any repairs you might be responsible for as a buyer versus things on the property that the seller would be responsible for, versus other aspects of the negotiation, versus mortgage rates and how when you go after when you get a particular rate, how much that depends on when you get it, and the questions of where in the world you really want to live, even, and why do you want to live there. I really do not enjoy all that much living in East Windsor. I think the politics is pathetic here, and I mean that as diplomatically as possible. I mean, when nobody, regardless of political party, can go to a town council meeting and say something and be taken seriously, it's a sad state of affairs. And when that group of people is in charge and their way of running things is through pay-to-play BS with the local vendors, government contractors, it does give you a feeling of cynicism. And when all the street signs, or a significant portion of them, are faded, and the sidewalks are busted, and the streets are busted, and there's a lot of abandoned homes and buildings, and so many lawns are unkempt, and tree branches are, swimming into the power lines, and all the houses are squished together, and there's not very much open space or sense of nature. I mean, to me, it's like aesthetically not pleasing. So I wanted out of East Windsor, and so did my wife. So that, so there's that question that you want to ask in life, again, as being part of self-improvement. What am I doing to get to where I want to go in life? And that's what I want to say about that for now. Now, I really want to move on to the news, and the sort of thematic topic I want to talk about here. The overarching theme is globalism versus nationalism. And before I get into the more fundamental aspect of this, the more philosophical, right, let's do a bit of news, shall we? You may know about violence breaking out in Gaza, right? Violence between Hamas and Israel. Is everything spelled correctly? I spelled president incorrectly last week on the Chiron, and it really pissed me off when I saw that. Right, so there's been violence this weekend between Hamas and Israel. And when you hear how it all goes down, I mean, this is sad stuff. This is sad stuff. I don't know where you go for your source of news. I got this article that I'm looking at now from the New York Times that was reading some Washington Post coverage of it last night. This is supposed to be the worst that the violence has been since the 2014 Israel-Gaza conflict that went on between July 18th, 2004 and August 18th, 2004. I'll just read you, I will tell you that thank God there's been a ceasefire that happened early this Monday between Hamas and Israel. And this is from the New York Times. The outbreak of violence appears to have begun on Friday when a sniper wounded two Israeli soldiers, a violent but localized expression of Palestinian impatience with Israel's failure to alleviate dire humanitarian conditions in Gaza. Okay. Now here's the thing, right? At least as it reads, it appears as if the Palestinians in Gaza are frustrated because of their economy, and they are therefore getting kind of violent. That's what we get. I'm just seeing if this is a comment from any of you. Nope, that's a Washington Post article. I, again, do encourage your comments. I want to try and integrate them. So, just so you know, feel free to say your piece here. But yeah, it appears that the folks in Gaza are upset that they're not getting the economy that they wanted. On the other hand, another way of looking at it is that Israel has imposed a blockade and made economic commerce very difficult for the Palestinians in Gaza. Why the folks in Gaza had to react violently, of course, is a very disconcerting thing. Very unfortunate. The fury, this is again from the New York Times article, the fury of the weekend's fighting reflected pent-up Palestinian frustrations over Israel's slow pace in easing restrictions that have sent the densely populated and impoverished territory into economic freefall, said Tariq Bakoni, an analyst with the International Crisis Group. There were some demonstrations at the border in Gaza, and this apparently led to Israeli soldiers being shot, which led to Israeli retaliation. And, this is resulting in civilian deaths. For those of you who don't know where this is happening, let's get a look at the Middle East here, just so you know what's going on. This is happening in Gaza. I've put it in red where that is. And here is an even more in-depth picture. All right, so this is where the violence is going on. Though again, thank God there has been a ceasefire. With respect to any political policy reaction, going to take this back, and this is where we get philosophical, and actually bring it back to conversations between globalism and nationalism. And this is sort of how I wanted to transition to it. So one of the fundamental problems, oops, there's a typo there. I apologize for it. It's going to happen in life, right? I just lost it again, and I apologize. Globalism, the nationalism on. I apologize. What's going on fundamentally as we contemplate the violence between the Israelis and the Palestinians in Gaza? I mean, they can't live with each other. Why can't they live with each other? Because Israel has got this fixed notion of having to live in a Jewish state, and the Palestinians have to live in a Muslim one. I don't see why we can't all secularize and be cosmopolitans. And the thing is, right, as we understand that the economy is changing, so nationalism is intensifying as people who are squelching for resources find that nationalism can work to their advantage. Perfect example. Interesting story out of, this one is from the Washington Post. America First may be last hope for these cattle ranchers. Published May 3rd by David J. Lynch. I know we always like pictures look good, right? This story is interesting. So this story is about the question as to whether or not food labeling in the United States should be labeled Made in America, because some people think that could be advantageous for Americans. Specifically, we're talking about cattle and meat and steak and burgers. Right from the article, the beginning of the article is about a group of cattle ranchers who say their livelihood may depend upon persuading Congress to order mandatory country of origin labeling for the steaks and burgers they produce. The government once required such labels, but lawmakers outlawed them in 2015 to comply with global trade rules. Notice here what these people are saying essentially is that freer global trade is hurting us, so please give us an economic advantage purely because we're American. And I mean, this is just not rational. It's, speaking economically, it's cheating. It's unfair. Look, there are situations where I think, for example, if you leave the country specifically to exploit the people that you do business with, that you employ, who you really treat more like indentured servants, then I think there is a case to be made that there should be economic penalties for those people. But to say that just because you're an American, that your products should be considered first by Americans, I mean, that's just pure nationalism, tribalism, collectivism, bias. It's not objective. It's not fair competition. It's not a rational way to vet the possibilities in the marketplace. And this is the thing, right? That's why there's an interesting tie between globalism and capitalism. Regulated, of course, and made fair. So nationalism has this real tribe-like, collectivistic-like thing that makes people very anxious and sort of into people who are just like them and only like them, and usually it's racial or religious or ethnic. I mean, we see the situation going on in Russia, where they feel this solidarity with Eastern Ukraine and Crimea because they are, Slavic. Or we see the situation in Israel, we see the issue in Palestine, and now you've got the Brexit thing going on, where the UK doesn't want to integrate with the EU, and you've got the separatist thing going on in Spain, and there's a lot of anxiety about people not wanting to be part of the group anymore and have their own identities and ask themselves what it means to have a tribal self-interest, so to speak, or a tribal interest, a collective interest, a group interest as opposed to a universal interest. And this troubles me very deeply. And when we think about what's going on, therefore, with this awful violence in the Middle East, it comes down to the fact that the Palestinians and the Israelis don't want to get along, and in my opinion, they're too caught up in the religious and ethnic distraction points to make that work. I mean, that's just my take on it. Happy to have your take on it and have a discussion with you about it, but that's just where I see it. And I'm troubled by those things. So the last thing I want to talk to you about today is a related issue. I I jotted down exactly how I wanted to put it, but I seem to have lost that bit. But I want to talk now about the broader issue of economic anxiety. I don't know about you, but as I observe the world, one of the things that I observe, correct me if I'm wrong here, is a degree of intense economic anxiety. I mean, we see it with these ranchers. We see it in the Middle East. We see it in Russia. We see it in the Rust Belt, where manufacturing plants have gone overseas and all these people are without jobs. We see it in academia. We see it in the media now that print journalism is losing a lot less money. The economy is in a very strange place right now. Much stranger, I think, than it was 20 years ago, even. And it just seems to me that it makes people anxious and deeply concerned about money. Look, I get it. I feel the economic anxiety with you. I do. I make $12 an hour, not very much, and would love to make more money, but I don't want it to stifle how I go about my living day to day. I refuse to allow economic anxiety to crush my soul or to create some sort of bias in the way that I behave. I just don't want anything to do with it. And it makes people, I think, want to make grabs for money in ways they would not ordinarily do it. Again, not saying I'm opposed to a degree of economic self-interest. You have to take care of yourself. You need to make money. Though protectionist policies, tariffs, violence, screwing other people over, ethnocentrism, all of these kinds of things I don't believe are the answer. I believe the answer really comes through appreciation. Yeah. I know it sounds overly simple. If you take the word appreciation from the economic point of view, it means just increasing in value. But what does it mean to appreciate something more literally? I mean, it means paying. I mean, it means not just paying for something, right? But it means taking a moment to identify a thing's significance to you and to show it. So in certain degrees, it means paying for things. I know we think to ourselves, well, aren't we paying for too much? Some of us are. Look at a degree of employers out there who are ripping off their employees. Look at higher education in various particular college institutions where more adjunct professors are being hired than full-time professors simply because adjunct professors can be paid less and given less benefits compared to full-timers. Think about the situation where you find that people over the age of 50-something are being let go of so that younger, less experienced people can be paid significantly less. I mean, things like this don't necessarily have to happen. And so I think that we have to have a conversation about what are we doing to be more appreciative and help each other out in this economy. What am I doing personally? How am I being a more appreciative individual? Well, to be honest, part of it for me was to take a break from writing and to just sit back and look at the world. And just, I believe, simply the step of awareness, I believe, is important. Just being aware of things outside of yourself. What's going on in the world outside of yourself a little bit. That's a step towards greater appreciation. So that's what I'm trying to do. My cousin Max Finn, puts out videos on Facebook of his 3 marketing tips. And I thought, usually I just sort of see it. Maybe I click like on my Facebook newsfeed, or maybe in fact I just scroll past it. Not because I'm a mean cousin who doesn't give a damn. I mean, I could feel so overwhelmed by my Facebook newsfeed that I don't really know where to start. But I just thought, here's someone who's taking the time to make something, so I want to hear what he has to say. I want to grow more aware of what he's doing and show a little bit of appreciation. So, I'm thinking about that too. I would certainly encourage you to offer your comments on this topic. I would love to chat with you about it. Moving forward with this public comment concept in the future, this vlog, the goal is what I said it is. It is really to facilitate deeper conversation and therefore create greater awareness and understanding, more empathy, and more community. And to focus on, self-improvement in politics, because those are, I know politics the best, and I think that I'm also very concerned about how I conduct myself and how I live correctly. And so I figure I might as well be honest with you about it and talk about it. Indeed. So I want to thank you so very much for taking the time to listen to me. You don't have to watch this when it's live on Facebook. You can watch it on my blog, publiccomment.blog. And you could just sort of stream it while you're driving or doing something else. You don't even have to watch. You can just listen. But I do encourage you to check out my website, publiccomment.blog, as I get better at using these various features. Thing I haven't figured out is how to manipulate the size of this box. Okay, here we go. Put it on my right. But I've got to change the size of the lettering then, don't I? So, okay, instead of 10, let's put it at 6. No, let's put it, okay, I see. Really can't. Yes, so do check out the blog at publiccomment.blog. Let me know what you think. Let me know your point of view, and let's have a conversation. And let's talk about making the world a better place. Again, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to doing this again very soon. My new phrase, I like to say it at work, at the tutoring center. When I say goodbye to people, I like to say, keep it real, as they say. So I'm going to say to you, ladies and gentlemen, keep it real. I'll talk to you later. Have a good day. Bye.